Okay, good morning, good morning, good morning. We're going to give everybody just an extra minute to get all logged in online. I see some kids out in the hallway still, so it'll be just a minute, and then we'll get right to it. Take a look at what we have on the board there for what we're working on today. Okay, here we go. Let's take a look at our list for what we've got going on today. We are going to start out with a short video on Rachel Carlson. How many of you in here are familiar with Rachel Carlson? Anybody? We'll at least learn a little something today. Then I'm going to show you the Quizlet Live link, because we are going to be studying up some new terms that are already going to be coming up on a quiz, not next week, because next week is spring break, but the following week. Got me? The following week. And that'll be like kind of in the same fashion. Like I call it a quiz, but that's going to be like half of your assessment. Does that make sense? Good. Okay. We're going to talk about some due dates here. You are already going to be starting the Unit 6 document today, which, by the way, when does the Unit 5 stuff have to be in? So here's what we got, okay? 12 weeks to a trimester, yes? 12 weeks to a trimester. We are currently on week 4, okay? The first unit, Unit 5, was 3 weeks, right? Okay, 3 weeks. The next unit is 2. This one, I'm not counting next week, spring break. And then we're going to come back the next week, and that will be the last one of the executive branch. You have until the end of this unit to turn in the stuff from last unit. Does that make sense? So we just turned in Unit 5 last week. We're on Unit 6. As soon as Unit 6 is done, Unit 5 folder will close. It will cease to be. So, but the end of this unit, you better turn in at least what you have done and give a shot at that assessment piece. Got me? Because the old stuff will be going the way of the dodo. It will be going away. Okay? And then we'll be on to the judicial. So then we'll finish up class with a little bit of CNN 10, some kind of interesting stuff in the news going on right now. So would everybody for me, well, I guess just kind of sit tight as I put this short video on Rachel Carlson up on the board. Here we go. Sorry for the delay. Just one more second.
Okay, the mama falcon was last spotted. Bald eagle? No way. Whoa. Dear Tim and Moby, I know what Indian summer is, but what is a silent spring? From Rohan. Silent Spring isn't about the weather or seasons. It's a book published in 1962 by the science writer Rachel Carson. In it, she shared concerns about the dangers of industrial chemicals, but its impact was much broader than that. Silent Spring raised an alarm about our fragile environment and helped kickstart a worldwide push to protect our water, air, and land. Rachel Carson was born in 1907 in Springdale, Pennsylvania. As a child, she was a bit of a loner. She loved exploring nearby forests and streams. She wrote stories about animals and even had a few published. Carson fed her interest by focusing on marine biology in college. She earned a master's degree in zoology, the study of animal biology. But instead of working in the lab, Carson blazed a new career path. She became one of the earliest science communicators. She simplified complex ideas so all people could understand them. Just like Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson, those Mythbusters guys. Oh, right. And us, I guess. Carson's first job was writing for a radio series, Romance Under the Waters. These short segments on marine life were wildly popular. She went on to publish her Sea Trilogy, 3 best-selling books about the ocean. They provided an in-depth view of the world beneath the waves. Carson hoped to inspire a protective feeling toward the environment and raise a warning about the damage new technologies were doing to it. She was especially concerned about a gas called DDT. That stands for, this word. It's a powerful pesticide used to kill insects like lice and mosquitoes. During World War II, the military sprayed it on soldiers to fight diseases. It killed bugs that often carried deadly germs. In the years after the war, farmers began using DDT on crops. Yeah, it worked on all kinds of pests. It didn't break down easily or wash away when it rained, so you didn't have to apply it over and over again. Soon it was being used around the world, and not just for agriculture. People sprayed it in their homes to get rid of bugs. Hospitals disinfected their wards with it. And millions of healthy people were sprayed to prevent outbreaks. Malaria was nearly eradicated. Some countries saw their cases drop from the millions to single digits. DDT became a symbol of scientific progress. Humanity was taming nature and making the world a safer place. But Carson saw one minor problem with this picture. How could such a lethal poison be safe for widespread use? She investigated further and found a frightening scene in the Midwest. Michigan State University used DDT to combat Dutch elm disease. That's a tree-killing fungus carried by beetles. It had been sweeping across America for years, ravaging cities. The university sprayed DDT everywhere to protect the landscape. Within a few years, the campus looked the same, but sounded a lot different. The trees were saved and the beetles were gone, but so were all the robins. Not a single chirping redbreast could be found across the campus. It was a somber and eerily silent spring. People never stopped to think how DDT might affect the food chain. The pesticide remained in the water and soil for decades. Earthworms eating dead leaves would build up DDT in their systems, and robins would eat dozens of worms every day. It was a case of biomagnification. Animals higher in the food chain accumulated more of the poison. Things that were safe at low doses could build up to deadly levels. Scientists had been aware of these problems for years, but nothing was being done. Carson knew she had to make regular folks understand the danger they were in. So she began Silent Spring with A Fable for Tomorrow.
There once was a town in the heart of America where all life seemed to live in harmony. In autumn, oak and maple and birch set up a blaze of color that flamed and flickered across a backdrop of pines. Then a strange blight crept over the area, and everything began to change. Mysterious maladies swept the flocks of chickens. The cattle and sheep sickened and died. Everywhere was a shadow of death. The people had done it themselves.
Yeah, Carson knew how to grab your attention. With such a dire vision of the future, Silent Spring made environmental protection into a moral issue about right versus wrong. She hoped readers would take responsibility and demand change. Well, chemical companies weren't going to sit still for that. If Carson's ideas took hold, it would cost them billions. So they launched sexist smear campaigns, insulting Carson just for being a woman. They questioned why she wasn't married and called her a crazy cat lady. Some even labeled her a spy, out to disrupt the American food supply. Yeah, you know you're desperate when you have to target a person instead of their ideas. But the attacks were ineffective. Within a year of her book's publication, Carson was testifying before Congress. She was in the middle of an exhausting battle with cancer. But she spoke with clarity and conviction, arguing for strict regulations on chemicals like DDT. It was her final public appearance. Within a year, new laws were being passed to safeguard our air, water, and land. The Environmental Protection Agency was created to enforce them. Meanwhile, studies confirmed that DDT weakened the shells of many bird species. Their young would die before they even hatched. So, in 1972, DDT was banned for general use in the United States. That led to a comeback in bald eagle and peregrine falcon populations. Yep, and Silent Spring's reach extended beyond that. It changed how we think about our relationship to the planet. Carson reminded us that we are not outside the natural world. In one television interview, she said,
Man's endeavors to control nature by his powers to alter and destroy the world inevitably evolve into a war against himself, a war he would lose unless he came to terms with nature.
Right now, go to the next thing on our list, folks. Let's go to Quizlet.live. Quizlet.live. Let's learn some new terms, shall we? There is your code, folks. We're at 248054. So 3 of you there. 7, 8, 27. Did you answer great? Anything fun? No? Waiting on a handful of you. Here we go. Get about 30 seconds to get into this game. Here we go. I assume everybody here is in, yes? Good, 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 good. I like that you can flip through the cards now once you're all logged in. So you're like ready for the game. Last call. Anybody not in? Everybody good? Okay. Here we go. There are your spirit animals, folks. And they're racing. Oh, Stingrays, what happened? Woo! In the home stretch even. Oh no, sea turtles. Are wolves going to walk away with this thing? Would that be trot? The wolves trot? What do they do? Wow. Nice job. Here we go. Round 2. And they're racing. Okay, we got us a competition here. Could be Mustangs, could be Stingrays, could be T-Rexes. Mustangs by length. Oh, Stingrays, what happened? Are Mustangs going to walk away with this? Wow, here we go, folks. Last round. This one's for all the Tostitos. And they're racing. Oh, could be like 5 or 6 people here now. Here we go. The Stingrays. Stingrays going to hold this out. Oh, nice. All right, here we go, folks. Great job there. Would everybody for me right now open up the Unit 6 document? Open up that Unit 6 document. You got a new folder called the Executive Branch. And under that, you're going to see a little something called Hybrid Civics Unit 6. Last unit was 5. We are now on 6. Okay, so it looks a little something like this. Oops. So it looks a little something like this. Okay. Take that bad boy. You want to put that into Notability. Raise your hand if you're having any issue with this, and I can come and help. Good there? Okay, so everybody's got that into Notability. Here's what we got. So the first thing that we're looking for is this. Now, what we're major learning target for today, is we are looking for what the rip does the president do? What is the president's job? Is it well outlined? Does every president just kind of do their own thing? What do we do there? And we're going to complete that by watching a quick video. This is not very long. Let me get this out of the way. And I'm going to mute myself so everybody online can hear this. Here we go.
Should we have a president? I'm not entirely sure.
I think it's very important to have a president, somebody that can lead the country.
Presidential democracies don't work.
We have a system of checks and balances with the three branches of government.
And I think knowing better, we wouldn't pick a presidential democracy.
In America, we spend a staggering amount of time talking about the president, and it might be a terrible idea. This isn't just a comment about our current president. This is a comment about all presidents, because we all know how the country works today. No matter who is in the White House, half of the country thinks that the world is going to end, and we act like it. So, is this rational? Or maybe, are we letting our brains get hacked? Would you say the symbolism of the presidency, when it was created, has it changed to what it is now?
Certainly, the focus on the presidency is way more intense than was ever imagined.
Presidents may take credit for the success of our economy, our schools, and everything else, but there's not a lot of evidence they deserve it. And yet we spend at a minimum 1 year out of every 4 arguing about who should be president. And then we spend at least the next 3 years arguing about what they're doing once they get there. If you made a pie chart of our collective civic brain, a huge slice would be spent on selecting and arguing about our head of state. But if you made another pie chart of all the elected officials who influence our lives, the president would barely register. What is the impact of local politics on our immediate community compared to the presidency?
The presidency gets a lot of national media attention, but in terms of the fabric of our lives, we're usually living with the policies and decisions of local and state government.
One of the things that makes America really unique is the separation of powers. And I don't mean just between the president, the Congress, and the Supreme Court. We have regional separations between states, counties, cities, townships, school districts.
We get a lot of federal dollars for transportation in Minnesota, but Minnesota has to decide how those dollars are going to be spent. What roads are we going to pave? What bridges are we going to fix? What transit are we going to invest in? So I think if you stop at the federal level, you say, I want you to decide what's going to come to the state, but I don't want to have any say in how that's going to be rolled out in my state or how that's going to be implemented here.
Forget Washington. In America, we have governors, state representatives, county commissioners, mayors, and school boards, literally thousands and thousands of elected officials who get to decide what our school systems look like, what happens if we get arrested, and even where we can build our garages.
The most day-to-day things that impact your life are decisions that are made by your locally elected officials. So our education system is overwhelmingly decided at the state level. How we set things up, how businesses are invested in, that's really at your state and your county and then at your city level.
These are all people we get to vote for, but how much time do we spend thinking about them? Compared to the president, it's not even close.
270 to be elected president of the United States.
What we do know is that politically speaking, the presidency controls our brains. And you can track this through media analytics. The number of times we mention the president and the minutes we spend debating his or her actions. In this sense, the brain space, the president is hugely influential because for many of us, it's the only elected office we hear about in the news.
The White House releasing copies of President Obama's original long-form birth certificate.
The president is ramping up a battle on the economic front.
Marriage, he was upset because he dented the Clinton brand again.
You know, we all have the same president, right? So it's a little bit easier for national media to cover something we all share. But the things that impact day-to-day lives, those decisions are made by locally elected officials.
Unfortunately, a lot of local races, there's not a lot of money that is put into them. And so a lot of mayors have other jobs, they have families. A lot of those local officials don't have the capacity, like a national election, to spend money to get, voting cards out and get commercial ads out and things like that. And so what ends up happening is that unless they are able to go to every door, people might not even know there's a race going on.
So what can we do as the media to alleviate this problem?
The work ahead is changing the media focus. And, I've talked to plenty of reporters and editors, and what they say is, hey, we're innocent here. We're going where the customer, the audience member wants to see. It's going to take a big movement of people in communities saying, hey, we take these issues that are being decided here in our neighborhood seriously. We're showing up for elections. We're going to hold our officials accountable, and we expect the media to give presidential attention to local issues.
So let's just ask the question. What would happen if we got rid of the presidency altogether?
I think we should have a president because they are the commander-in-chief.
I think there needs to be leadership in the executive branch.
I think it's easier for the nation to look towards one leader.
Now, we'd obviously be giving up on a lot of our story. I mean, the symbolism of the presidency is as American as it gets. It's the song, it's the money, it's what school kids say they want to be. But if we're being honest, we'd also be freeing up a lot of cognitive horsepower in the news, in our social media, even in our private dinner conversations. An argument can be made that if we spent all this mental real estate on other issues, well, we'd probably be a lot less frustrated with our schools, our prisons, and our garages.
You know, when we look at the issues that are so divisive in the national media, we get an opportunity at a local and state level to engage in conversations that are more personal, more one-on-one. If you are passionate about a topic and you want to engage, that's where you're going to make, I think, the biggest impact and the biggest difference is by talking to your neighbors and your locally elected officials.
Now, to be fair, we probably want to maintain the checks and balances within our federal government. But what alternatives to a president are out there?
You travel to Europe and you're going to see parliamentary system in which the power is in the legislative branch. The legislative branch decides to select who's going to be in the cabinet and who will be kind of the prime minister of that cabinet, who then becomes the symbolic leader. But in terms of power, the prime minister is one among equal in the cabinet.
Maybe our president could be a group of randomly selected citizens. Maybe it could be the governor of a state, each one serving a one-month term. Or maybe it could be something like those Vulcan councils you see on Star Trek. Some of these other possibilities would prevent us from arguing endlessly over a personality we don't really control, and a personality that arguably doesn't control us.
There's no doubt that the president casts a large and dark shadow over what is going on in America. And certainly the issues that come up in local politics, one of the reasons that citizens may not be giving as much attention to what the local decision making is because they assume that it's being taken care of somewhere else.
Okay, I totally understand that right now, as you're watching this or listening to this, you may feel a little bit angry or ticked off, and that's totally understandable. I mean, to ask the question, do we even need a presidency? Yeah, it might be a little enraging, but that's one of the great things about this country, that we can even ask that question. Look, we've just shown you evidence that we spend an unbalanced amount of attention on the presidency. The question is, how do we fill the greater space of politics? Think about your local politics and how it affects your immediate life. How do you feel about that? What do you think? Hey everybody, this is Toussaint Morrison. In our next episode,
All right. So the questions on your sheet are as follows. Why might we be focusing too much on the presidency and national government? Okay. Now, we've only had men in that presidential position, so it's fair to say that we've been concentrating all that effort on men, just from time to time, whoever is in the presidency. I think about how much effort we put into who's going into the White House. I mean, the current president hadn't even been in there for 100 days yet, but they're already asking the question, President Biden, what's your re-election campaign going to look like? And it's like, good governor, the bed's still warm. I haven't been here a long time. Can I just focus on what I'm doing here? You guys know what I'm saying? Okay. We focus so much energy on campaigns and who's in the office as opposed to what are they doing. And one of the big points that this guy's making is, presidential decisions do not impact you nearly as much as your local government. Not even close. Okay. So anyway, how does the media impact how we think about politics? Did you guys get at least an example of one thing there? Yes? Good? I think that's fairly obvious, yes? Okay. If you were to look up, obviously you guys know, and just by taking Civics A, that if you watch CNN, you're going to get a much different story than if you watch Fox, right? If you watch Breitbart, you're going to get a significantly different story than if you watch NBC, right? Okay, so what they choose to talk about is the content that's being delivered to you. Okay, and a lot of that is really geared towards which president or which party they want to advocate for. Okay, what are some alternatives to giving the executive power to a president? Does anybody give me a couple examples of one thing? You know, what's one thing that we could do there? What's an example of one thing? Any? Yeah, go ahead. They kind of just decided that, you know, it's kind of a council, or they could, you know, rotate it and go, you're the figurehead this month, right? Okay. Kind of just talked about stripping that executive power from the president as well was kind of one of those other ideas, right? And making it more on that local level and kind of giving that executive power to maybe some of the other branches, or kind of reshaping what that checks and balances system looks like, right? Okay, as we are going to learn in the first main job of the executive branch, what we're going to talk about here in just a moment, but not yet, is you know, that job is to just carry out those laws. Right? That's what the executive branch's job is. And although we kind of have narrowed our view to the executive branch of being the presidency, okay, let's take a look at what that job is and how maybe we could change that. Does that make sense, guys? So did everybody fill out the first box, the first 5 points? Good? Okay. Next part, main job of the executive branch. So let's take a look here. I'm just going to give you guys some answers because I'm just kind of that kind of guy, right? I'm just that kind of nice guy. Take a look at what we got here. Here you go. Okay. What is the main duty of the executive branch? It's pretty easy. You're just going to carry out those laws. Okay, so it's kind of neat that we just studied the legislative branch because we see that it's their job to make the laws and it's the executive branch's job to carry those out. Okay, here we go. Qualifications to be president or vice president: must be a United States born citizen. Okay, must be 35 years of age or older. What if it was just 35? We only had 35-year-olds. We didn't have the older part. Kind of weird. Only president for a year. Resident of the United States for at least 14 years. Okay. You guys know this probably just from previous stuff, but are you familiar with that 22nd Amendment? You guys familiar with that one? This precedent, okay, was set by George Washington, because George Washington was president how many times? Anybody know? Twice. After the second time, he renounced his power. He said, "Guys, I'm done. I'm stepping down." And I can just imagine the collective gasp in the room when George Washington, now he didn't sing it like he did, like they did in Hamilton, but he did come forward and say, "Guys, I'm done. This is my second term. I gave you 8 years. I gave you a ton more years in public service. I'm stepping away." And in fact, little nugget about George Washington that you guys should remember when you get into your American history classes: Congress tried to offer him a crown. I am not kidding about that. Imagine how vastly different our government would look if George Washington would have said, "Oh, you want me to be king? Sure, I'll be king." How amazing would that have been? How amazingly different from what we have now. And that greatness of George Washington is the fact that he renounced his power, that he went, "No, I don't want to be king. I'll be something different." And that presidency is what was kind of modeled after him. Now, all of those presidents that you guys see over on the window there, all basically had an unwritten rule that I'll serve 2 terms and step down, 2 terms and step down, 2 terms and step down until you get to, does anybody know? Who served more than 2? And it was during a time that it was actually Not necessarily warranted, but the guy was popular enough to do it. FDR. Anybody know how many terms he had in office? This guy got elected, okay, beginning of the Great Depression, carried us through, and then died halfway through World War II. Okay? In the middle, well, it wasn't the middle of his fourth term, but he was elected for 4 terms and died. Okay? At the end of FDR's term, they went, you know what? We love FDR. Guy was a great president, and he did a lot for us. However, we're going to set up a system to where you can only be president twice. Because they looked at it and went, it was great what FDR did. And, you know, well, even a lot of people today think that FDR, some people look at FDR and went, he changed the scope of our government, he ruined our country, blah, 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 blah. But if you don't like a president, or if you think that somebody being president for more than 2 terms is a tyranny, okay, then that's why you might like this 22nd Amendment, okay? So next thing, presidential succession, okay, Act of 1947. This is kind of the order of operations, so to speak. Like it goes from the president to the vice president to the Speaker of the House to President pro tempore. Good? Everybody got this? Okay. If there is a vice president vacancy, a new vice president should be appointed by the president. VP can assume the presidential duties if a president is unable to perform the job because of illness or whatever. If they're incapacitated in any fashion, that vice president can just kind of slip in there. Okay? Good? Okay. I love talking about this presidential history. I know that some of you guys are kind of getting bored about this, but it used to be the vice president was just the second place candidate. Know what I mean? Okay. So first election, you've got two potential candidates. You've got George Washington, you got John Adams. George Washington won it. John Adams was second place, so he just slid in as vice president. Okay. They didn't change that until like 1800 when they made the vice president, okay, an actual running mate with the first one, okay? So let's get on to the next thing. Oh, you guys all know how to access this Try3 Google presentation, yes? Yes? Okay, good. And those of you that are either watching this recording or watching online know to click on that link if you ever want to see these slides, okay? So there is a plethora of different things that the president does. And I would argue that even the guy from the video kind of hit the nail on the head in that it's like we are putting so much energy into a limited job of a figurehead, okay? Does the president really have that much power when it comes to your everyday lives, you the citizen? I would argue not so much, okay? First job, chief executive. And essentially what that means is they're responsible for executing or carrying out the laws passed by Congress. That's kind of just a synonym for what the executive branch stands for. Commander-in-chief, they are also the head of the Army, Coast Guard, Navy, Marines, Air Force. Okay, so all those chiefs of staff will come in, all those generals will essentially follow whatever order the commander-in-chief dictates. Okay? Chief legislator, they recommend or suggest laws that they want Congress to either pass or remove. Okay, so we don't really consider the president a part of the legislative branch in the big scope of things, but they are the chief legislator. Okay, they're the chief of state. They're the symbol of the U.S. and its people. The president is a chief diplomat responsible for our relations, responsible for our diplomacy with other nations. They're also the party leader. Kind of an unwritten rule is, if you are a Republican president, then you're also kind of in charge of the Republican Party, right? Because those Republican efforts are kind of dedicated to getting you reelected and fundraising and boosting local leadership and, electing local authorities, that type of stuff, okay? So that was actually the first question that a lot of people have been asking in the last couple months is because, former President Trump has kind of been off the grid, so to speak. Well, is he still the figurehead of the Republican Party? That's what a lot of people are asking. Okay, are we going the way of Trump Republican Party, or is there somebody else that's going to kind of act as this party representative? Chief citizen represents all citizens and sets an example for civic behavior. Okay. Good. Do you guys need one more minute on this? Yes? Okay. There's a lot of chair movement going on over there, isn't there? Is that coming from downstairs or what? All right. If you are not done with this, that's okay. I will come back to this, okay? Because I know that this is kind of the labor-intensive one. Let me just get these 5 words written down, okay? The duties of the vice president. You guys know this from the legislative branch, okay? The vice president presides over the Senate, okay? Presides over and confirms the electoral vote. You guys remember that was kind of an issue with the election results of the last election, okay? The sitting president said, Vice President Pence, are you going to accept the results of this electoral vote? And from there, well, we all kind of have an idea of what happened, okay? Executive departments, the executive departments that advise the president, okay? Cabinet members and their top aides are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. You've been seeing this process kind of play out just recently. Yes? Okay. Very good. Does anybody need more time on the slide? Or are we good? I'll go back to the last one like I promised. There we go. Okay. Those of you that are living in the online world right now, do you have any questions for me before I cut you loose for the day? This kind of fulfills your online requirement or your attendance requirement for today. Anything for the good of the order? If not, I will just talk to you the next time here, okay?